I'm here at one of my recent property development projects. It's a 3-bed semi-detached house in Sunderland. Bought this property prior to auction for 60k. Refurbishment was around 15.5k, and it's now sale agreed going through at 115k. Profit on this is going to be around 29.5k with a return on investment of around 34%. Now, I bang on about return on investment and the importance of it all the time, because it's not just about the amount of money you make, it's about your return on investment as well. How hard is the money invested working for you? That's crucial as well. So you need to make sure your return on investment is high enough so you can pay for finance costs. You can, if you need to, if you're in a marketplace that's not great, where property prices could fall, but you've still got enough profit to make a generous profit margin regardless of market conditions. So it protects you against any downturn in the market as well, making sure you've got a strong return on investment. I look for at least 20% ROI, so return on investment. Any project I do, any flip project I do, I'm looking for 20% or higher. In this case, we're coming in at 34%. That gives me the opportunity to do deals where I can get strong enough profit margin so all the time, energy, effort in doing a deal gets paid off, gets rewarded with that strong return on investment. This deal was fairly straightforward, didn't need a huge amount of work to this property in the grand scheme of things, not compared to at least some of the refurbishments I've done before. So front door was okay, back door was fine, windows were fine, the boiler was fairly new, even the kitchen I've kept, which is unusual for a flip project. I normally have to rip everything out and start again. But this one, the kitchen was okay. Don't get me wrong, wouldn't be my first choice of style for a kitchen if I was putting one into a property. But it's all right. So ultimately, it makes no sense to rip it out and start again. Radiators were fine after a little bit of radiator paint. That's a big tip for you. If you're doing refurbishment projects, your radiators can be painted, don't necessarily always have to be replaced. But you need to understand the difference between a radiator that can be spruced up, if it's a little bit yellowy, a little bit yucky, compared to a radiator that is absolutely beyond help. So don't try and save radiators that have had their day. So a lot of the properties I refurb, very old properties, haven't been touched for a very long period of time, so the radiators are beyond help. So don't try and save them when they can't be saved. In this case, there could be, and that keeps the cost down. So what I did do was put a brand new bathroom in. The electrics needed to be upgraded, so it wasn't a full rewire, but it was a bit of an upgrade. The damp proofing had to be done, so there's a fair bit of damp proofing to be done in this property. Ceilings had to be boarded before they were skimmed. Whole property was fully replastered. New flooring, decoration, few doors, etc. But not a major job in the grand scheme of things. The chimney stack had to be repointed, so that was heavily weathered. There was water getting in, so that had to be done. Not a huge job, but something you don't necessarily always have to do. Front and back garden tidied, etc. So grand scheme of things, not a huge project. Took about 5 weeks to do, and ultimately ended up with a renovated house that went on the market, sale agreed inside a couple of weeks. So demand was there and it sold quickly. This property I bought prior to auction, so before the property actually went for its first cycle at auction, I got this tied up. So big tip for you if you're interested in buying at auction, which is a great way of securing some great properties that can make a lot of money when you're flipping properties. Make sure that you don't necessarily wait until the day itself of the auction. In this case, I got a deal tied up before it even went to auction, because of course when it goes to auction, everyone else will be bidding on it. But in this case, I was the only one bidding, and you never know what is going on in the mind of the seller. They might be looking to just accept a deal, get it tied up. Some people, if you're a property investor like me, or turning properties around to sell or to rent out, then you see a property as an asset. Do it up, make some money. Not everyone does. Some sellers just want rid of a property. They see it as it's costing them money, it's costing them council tax, etc. They just want to sell it. And when they put the property to auction, in some cases, they're accepting that they're not going to get the highest amount of money that they could get for their property. What attracts them to auction is the speed and the certainty of sale. So with that in mind, if you're bidding prior to the day of the auction even starts, you can do a deal in some cases. Not all. Most sellers will probably wait till the day of the auction, but if you can get that deal before, you're not competing with other investors in most cases, or at least you're competing with a lot less if you're doing that deal prior to auction. So always worth putting a bid in before the auction date even starts. Now, just to give you an idea, this property was going into auction with a guide price of £73,000. What's a guide price? If you don't know, if you're new to auction, a guide price is simply just an indication. It's a guide of what the bids are likely to be coming in at for a property. Doesn't mean it will sell for that figure. Guide price could be very low to draw more interest in, or it could be closer to what would be the reserve price. The reserve price is what the seller is willing to accept. So if the property sells, or if the property gets to that figure, if the bids come in at that figure, it's going to sell. So if it doesn't meet that reserve, it might still sell, but there's no guarantee. The seller would be consulted and asked if they want to sell lower than the reserve price. So in this case, it's going to auction, or was going to auction at 73. I got a deal accepted at 60k plus auction fees, bear in mind, but ultimately 60k. So it's a big difference. The reserve would have probably been, as it often is, around 10% higher than the guide price. No hard and fast rules, but generally speaking, thereabouts. So in this case, probably would be around 80k, and it was tied up at 60. So don't assume you have to come in and bid at the guide price. You can bid whatever you want, whatever works for you, and you can do it any time. Like I did in this case, prior to auction. You can do it on the day of the auction. So I've still bought a lot of properties on the day of an auction. And you can also buy post-auction as well. So I buy a lot of property post-auction. So if that property fails to meet reserve, great opportunity to swoop in and get a deal post-auction. But this property got tied up before it even went to that first auction cycle. And it's a great way of buying properties through this process. So auctions are great. Just make sure if you're buying at auction at whatever time that is, pre, on the day, after, that you have done your due diligence. Because once you buy at auction, once you get your bid accepted, that's it. You are legally bound to buy that property. So that means doing your research, understanding what your resale value will be before even putting your bid in, understanding what your refurbishment costs are going to be, making sure you've got sufficient demand to sell that property quickly in advance. Make sure you've looked through the legal pack. Make sure you've sent it to your solicitor so they've advised you on the legal pack and what's in there and anything you need to be aware of before you put your bid forward. Make sure up front you've done all of this so you can confidently bid at auction. Because like I say, once you get the bid accepted, that's it. You're tied in. So this is a great way of buying property pre-auction or post-auction at any time, but make sure you've done your due diligence. So this project really was fairly straightforward. It was a quick turnaround of around 5 weeks. Now, why is the speed of turnaround so important? It's important because it directly impacts your return on investment. So, for example, if you did a deal, cost you £500,000 to buy the property, do it up, all your buying and selling costs, and you made 50k profit on that £500,000. That's a 10% return if it took you a year to do. Not good enough. Because if you had to finance that deal, then ultimately that 10% return, if it needed finance and you were paying, say, 10% on the money, then actually you've made nothing. Because 50k is your interest cost alone on a £500,000 project. So when people talk about big numbers, I made 50k here, 60k here, that's fine, but we've got to look at the return investment as well. And the speed at which it takes, the time at which it takes to do a deal is also crucial. So in this case, we've got a property that was turned around, the refurb in around 5 weeks, from the point of getting keys in my hand, starting the refurb to cash in the bank on sale. It should complete inside 6 months. And that's a goal for me, to ideally do my projects in 6 months or less. That means if you take this deal as a hypothetical example, use this deal and said, right, 34% return investment, just under 30k profit. If I did another deal just like this, because this one took 6 months, I do another deal inside another 6 months, so 2 in a year, the same figures, which they're never the same, but hypothetical example, let's say they were. You've turned a 34% return investment into 68% annually. That means you're making 68% annually on your money. Now that is a pretty strong return investment. Not always possible in all cases because you'd have to have another deal perfectly lined up at that time to use that money straight away. But it's possible, and it shows just how powerful flips can be, how you can make massive chunks of cash flipping property in a fairly short space of time. So hopefully you've found this video useful. If you enjoy these kind of videos where I'm talking about projects I've done, I'm showing you, talking through the numbers, this kind of stuff, if you want to see more of this, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. If you found some value in the video, go ahead, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, really helps me out a lot, and you will see me again soon.